Hi, and welcome to another episode of eComOne. And today's guest is Andy Birkitt. Now, Andy, I have known for pretty much on the nose 20 years. And that's because we worked together for 20 years, give or take. I think we've maybe had 6 months off for good behavior between us, haven't we?
Just about,
Somewhere
yeah.
there. And Andy is the lead technical engineer at eComOne and SEO Traffic Lab, which is both of mine, and our agencies. How you doing, Andy? You okay?
I'm doing really well, thanks. Yeah, it's nice to be here.
Good, good. So Andy is still in lockdown, looking to come back to the office in a couple of weeks, with a bit of luck. So
Yeah,
I've made it back to the office now. I'm sort of a couple of weeks into my return, as are quite a lot of the team. But Andy's coming in a couple of weeks. So I think what would be great, Andy, is just to sort of say, really kick off and ask you really, what do you think is the sort of one thing you wish you knew about digital marketing before you started this journey?
oh crikey. Yeah, that's a tough one. One thing, I think, not so much a thing that I knew. I think what I would have liked to have known before I started in this, and bear in mind, I didn't come to digital marketing. I was quite late to the game. Um, I wish I'd understood more about how dynamic the role was. It's not a lot of people think that it's a fixed point. You sort of come along, you learn how to do this, and that's what you do for the rest of your career. Well, if that's what you're thinking, then you'll get a pretty big shock when you enter the world of digital marketing. It's an ever-changing, dynamic role. You're always learning something new. I think if I'd have known that beforehand, I might have a few less grey hairs than I've got now. But yeah, be prepared to be constantly learning. Things are changing. The algorithms change all the time. Things, even stuff with the feeds, is changing constantly. Things are getting updated. There's always ways to improve things.
Yeah.
There's always new things coming out. So yeah, I think if I'd have understood that a bit, I'd have been a bit more prepared for the role, really. So
Yeah.
it's an enjoyable role. I love it. It's
I think we see it. Obviously, we have obviously quite a few team members, staff members, and every year we're recruiting 2, 3, 4 people. Through our apprentice track, graduate track in our businesses. And the one thing that sort of stands out is that mindset piece, is what you're saying of the reality is when these people come in, you can see straight away the ones that are really going to do well, or the ones that, most of them do, but the ones that are going to do well have that sort of open mindset to going into something and just keep learning, and clearly they get to a point where they're incredible at it quite quickly. We can find within a year or two, people that are super smart in their specific talent, but it's more that mindset and that culture fit to the business where they're willing to keep learning, willing to keep taking advice.
You've got to be willing to learn, and it's not really a 9 to 5 job either. It's you might get to 4:30 on a Friday and think, yeah, weekend's here, and then something goes wrong with the feed, or you've got to be prepared to say, well, this client pays us to look after that for them, so I'm not going home until it's resolved. And you need that sort of, I don't know whether it's a mentality or what, but I think you need to be a bit crazy to do this job as well. So
that's the thing, I guess. Obviously it is all 24/7, isn't it? All of our clients are generating leads, selling products all day, every day. And
you can't just switch
challenge
off. It's not like the feed stops working when you leave work. Like, it's still going on in the background, and sometimes in the morning you'll come in and it's like, oh Christ, what's happened there, sort of thing. But you've got to be able to, I think you've got to be able to react, is what I'm saying. It's not a come in, sit down and do job. Not like a lot of jobs where you'll come in and you'll do the same thing day in, day out. You don't in this job, which is probably one of the things I like about it, to be fair. I'm a bit of a...
So obviously, you've not always done digital marketing, as I haven't, and but we've done it for a long, long time. But what would you say sort of your turning point in your career?
Crikey, yeah. I mean, like you say, it's not, I didn't come into, I think I was in my 40s. So I consider myself quite late coming to the game of digital marketing. I would say that when I did do that, it was a turning point. I'm an engineer by trade.
Yeah.
You know, I was a packaging engineer.
Yeah.
That's where I learned my trade.
We always had that sort of technical mindset.
Yeah, I've always been. Even when I first started working for you, you know, when I first started working for you, we was a retail business.
Yeah.
And I was a technician building and repairing computers. So
those guys listening to the podcast, so Andy and myself have worked together for 20 years, which is a crazy, you know, I think in digital marketing years, that's probably 100 years, isn't it? I don't know if that's a thing. Yeah. So we had a retail business, a distribution business, an e-commerce business, all under one umbrella, but we had different routes to market. So Andy very much he ran very, very many different departments over the years, but they all had that technical slant to them, whether it was building thousands of computers a year or managing our network we had about 40 staff, didn't we, in the retail business and the e-commerce business. And then that led on to, you know, we were an e-commerce store selling online, you know, about 11 years ago. We stopped, we stopped part of it and we sold off part of it. And then this is where we transitioned into the agencies that we have now. And then you obviously transitioned from doing our SEO to doing clients SEO to doing feeds to doing. So we're very much, we have a very technical episode ahead of us here. So that's what I want to get stuck into.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think basically I'm a problem solver. You know, that's what I do. That's what I do in my job. So
yeah,
I like puzzles. I like challenges. It's not always conducive to my health and you know what hair I've got left. But so the turning point really for me was when you made the decision to shut down the retail side of the business and saw enough in me to say, come along on this journey with me, Andy. I think we're going to do something amazing. And, you know, from the early days when there was just me and you.
Yeah.
And I've pretty much done, I think I'm probably, apart from yourself, the only person in the company that's done pretty much every role within the marketing side. So I've done, you know, I've done the SEO, I've done client management, I've done all the technical stuff. The turning point for me is the technical stuff. I think that's where I'm happiest. It's where I'm comfortable. You know, when you said to me, right, I want you to become lead technical engineer, you know, that was the sort of ambition achieved, if you like. And yeah, obviously there's still places for me to go and there's still stuff that I want to do, which, like I say, you're forever learning in this job, so it doesn't stand still. But like I say, I am a problem, you know, I'm a problem solver. That's what I enjoy doing. So
yeah, we certainly do, day in, day out. So obviously most of our listeners are e-com stores, you know, eComOne, and let's have a real focus on feeds and sort of merchant center. Feeds, merchant center, a bit of a sort of you know, a bit of a, I guess, not secretive, but a bit of a sort of mystery, I guess, you know. Feed, oh yeah, we take a feed from our Magento or Shopify, we push it into this, that, and the other, and we do shopping. Well, as you know, and as we know as an agency, there's a bit more to it than that. So,
yeah, I wish it was that simple.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's obviously we have a whole business that is geared around, you know, is predominantly geared around feeds that then feed into campaigns that sell, you know, hundreds plus £1 million worth of stuff a year. So we know feeds, well, you know feeds inside out. So I think for those that are listening that are maybe getting started, that are sort of on their start of their journey, you know, what is a data feed and what is Merchant Center?
Yeah, okay. So data feed in its simplest form is a way of sending large amounts of structured data. It's current data and up-to-date data, usually for use from a website or an app or some sort of online tool. There's generally two kinds. There's product feeds, and in our industry, there's a news feed as well, which if you see a blog or anything like that, you like the old RSS feeds, that's that sort of thing. Generally for product feeds, which is mainly what we'll talk about, they are either in XML or CSV format. And they are generated by something within your e-commerce store. In most instances, that'll be a plugin that goes straight into your back office system, and generates a file by pulling certain fields from the product information that you've already got in the site. So the bulk of the work's done already because you've got all your product data there. It's a way of taking that product data out and giving it to a publisher. And by publishers, I mean things like Amazon Store, or in our case, Google Shopping or PLAs, so product listing ads.
So we've got that feed. We've got it either in the one or two formats, and it's got various data in it. And then we sync, link, point that to Merchant Center. So just explain that sort of process and what the Merchant Center is for the listeners.
Yeah, so Merchant Center is basically Google's management tool.
Yeah.
To take a feed, you have to have a Google account, obviously, to be able to do it.
Yeah.
You upload the feed there in order for the products to be checked, basically, and verified that they're allowed to be. Because obviously Google have a set of rules that you must adhere to for those products to become visible on Shopping Channel.
Yeah.
So, for example, there's certain attributes that you must have within the feed. Things like it has to be unique. You know, every product has to have a unique ID. They have to have a title, a link to the product, price, and a link to an image product.
So if you upload a feed and you haven't got some of these, Merchant Center will tell you you're missing X, Y, Z, and that's where you then look at going back in, adjusting, the data set, adding stuff in, liaising with the client, liaising with the store owner to say, right, we're missing these. If you've uploaded 2,000 SKUs, you might find that so many are missing this, that, and the other. And there's like 500 things that are missing, maybe. Doing that piece of work to make sure that feed is full. Would that be right?
Yeah. I mean, you can, as long as you've got those items in, you can have a pretty basic feed up and running fairly quickly. And then it's a case of working, like you say, working with the client. In generally, it's an odd one because a lot of clients that either don't have a dev and they're doing all the work themselves, or they have devs and it costs money to do that. So sometimes it can be a bit of a battle getting them to add some of those bits in. But
so you've got to liaise with the client and make sure that ultimately it's in their interest. If products are missing certain data, those products won't be allowed and won't be passed. So you end up with 80% of your SKUs going through, or whatever it may be, and then that can affect other sort of factors in your account. If you don't have a certain score, I believe, within your Merchant Center, something that not a lot of people know about is something called high score, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that was introduced it's about middle of last year, I believe. So it's relatively new still, but like I say, not a lot of people know about it. It does affect the way your products will perform on Google Shopping. It is a twofold thing now. So part of it's due to Merchant Center and part of it's in the AdWords account itself. But each section has a score, basically, and the higher the score, the more likely your products are to show and perform better.
What would be the sort of top three things you think, or a couple of things that you think that obviously people won't be familiar with the high score that are listening? It's quite a guarded thing. I know you and probably three of the guys went down like mid second quarter, I think, last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
To Google, and they did a whole sort of afternoon on high score. What sort of a couple of the key things? I think we've maybe touched on one. Obviously making sure that you are, you've got all your variables in there. But what would be a couple of other key areas?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things with it is trying to maintain what I call a clean feed or a green feed. So if you look in your Merchant Center, anything that's coming up as a warning will be in. So that Google use a traffic light system, basically. So red means it won't get shown. Amber is sort of, we'll show it, but you're not going to perform quite as well as you would if it was green. And then green obviously is everything's brilliant, let's crack on and sell some product. Obviously red will stop things appearing in the feed, and the higher the percentage of those. So if you've got high percentage of, say we've got 4,000 products,
Yeah.
and 1,000 of those are getting disapproved, but 3,000 are going through fine. So there's going to be a percentage of those products showing up with disapprovals in the merchant center.
Yeah.
The lower that percentage, me personally, I like to see none of those errors above 1%.
So you're looking at 99% green is what we're aiming for as a minimum or as a target.
Yeah, I mean that's a target we sort of set ourselves. You can, I would say definitely no more than sort of 2-3%.
Yeah. Okay.
And obviously, the better that score, the better your feed will. It is a performance factor, so you live with it yourself if you don't deal with it. So
great takeaway there, guys. If you're using Merchant Center, you're using a feed already. Straight away, get in your merchant feed, get in your merchant account. Your Google merchant account, and look at your percentage. And if it is low, you might think to yourself, and we do get this. You might think to yourself, well, okay, it's 20%. That's been disallowed, but it doesn't matter because they're not products I want to sell. But it does matter, because you might not want to sell them, but what you're saying to Google is, I've got an 80% high score, or that element of the high score is 80%. There's other elements.
Yeah.
You either want to take those products out of the feed, or you want to adjust them so they are in there correctly. There's no excuse, because I think quite often people are just get busy, lazy, whatever you want to call it, and they leave SKUs in there, don't they? And it's really making sure that it's clean, super clean. Okay, so
definitely, if you just touch on that last bit that you said, Rich, if you've got products you're not interested in selling, you've no wish to sell, take them out of the feed. Don't have them. Don't just dump your entire product catalog in there and then sort of hope for the best. So you really have to think about it, and this is where a lot of people come unstuck. They don't, they think it's everything's in there. It's all I've got a few that.
Sure. So we've got our feed, we've created our feed, we put it in our merchant center, and we've adjusted some things in terms of, the level of percentage that is allowed. But what would you say some of the sort of, how can we simplify, automate that process to speed things up using some technology, automations to create a better feed? What would you say?
I mean, in merchant center itself, there's a few things that you can do. Obviously, regardless of whether your catalog changes regularly or not, I would say you should be pulling that feed at least once a week. You can pull it as many as, if your catalog changes a lot and regularly, you can change your feed and update your feed as much as 4 times a day.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one, isn't it? Because you've got so many people out there. I think that's, I get asked that a lot. Oh, we've got a lot of products that go out of stock. How are you going to cope with that? I don't want to be putting adverts out there for things we don't sell. Well, if you're updating the feed 4 times a day, obviously that can alleviate the majority of those SKUs. Because if something's out of stock, it's not then when the feed goes and grabs it again, or the merchant center goes and grabs it again. The product will show out of stock, and then the ads will not show based on the criteria that you've set.
I mean, there's things, that's a question we get asked a lot, even on the SEO side, if a product's out of stock, what do I do about it, sort of thing. Well, if it's coming back into stock, definitely, then, don't remove it from the feed, just update the feed, make sure that it shows, that it's an important criteria to show in the feed that it's out of stock. And, so, I mean, there are rules you can write if you want to temporarily remove items from a feed. You can do that in Merchant Center as well. I mean, we use a tool to do a lot of ours just because it's easier and it's a much nicer interface than Merchant Center. You can schedule regular updates. You do that right at the beginning when you're doing a feed. That's probably one of the easiest automations. But I would say make sure most of our feeds we update daily. Regardless of whether it highlights other problems that may not be quite as noticeable.
Because we've seen, obviously, as we said at the beginning, we've been doing this a long time. So we've seen people that have come to us, we look at their feed and it hasn't been updated for a year. Well, clearly doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
Some things are seriously out of stock. You know, some things are not been sold for years. You know, we have certain clients, don't we, that only get a small run of products, so they only get, you know, a small batch of high end sort of allocation from certain high end brands. They only get 5 of this product, 5 of this SKU. So really challenging to get volume, because you haven't got volume to sell, but you still want to push them through, sell them. So obviously once they're sold, the feed gets updated, shows it out of stock. Those products then don't trigger in the Google index. How can an e-commerce business optimize its feed, you know, even more? So we've got this sort of standard feed, if you like, that can come through, you know, and that's quite often what you see as a start point. You've got this feed that comes through from the store, goes to the merchant center, and then from the merchant center pushes through to the AdWords account, you know, and you run your ads. And that's sort of a start point for most e-com stores. But what we're saying, you know, is, well, that's the start point, but what are some of the things that we can really do and people listening in can really do to that feed to optimize it, to make sure that they get, you know, more bang for the buck with the Google shopping, you know, in the feed?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. So in the old days, you'd have had to make sure that your feed was as good as it could be at source, so within your e-commerce platform. But that's the real power now of Merchant Center in its new iteration. So it depends how long you've been using Merchant Center, but Merchant Center interface is new. So there's a lot of new features been added into the current version of Merchant Center. It's been long overdue. I think it was the last platform that Google decided to really look at. They have a system to write customized rules now, so you can add things like custom labels, which we use all the time, as you know. They can all be added within Merchant Center. It is basically a sort of if then do this sort of scenario. So it's
maybe give an example of what would be your go-to custom variable, custom label. If any, I mean, straight away, what's your go-to custom label you would create for an account?
Yeah, custom label. I mean, for us, we use things like what we call price breaks. So to you know, you don't want to be bidding the same price. You know, if you've got a product that's £20 and a product that's £200, you don't want to be getting the same bid on those products, because you're going to lose out on some of them massively. So we use a thing called product price break. It's a custom label, and we will look at an account and look at the price range of the products and then create price bands within. So generally we use custom label 0 unless it's already being used. But there's other things you can do. And a lot of this you can do without interfering with the feed at source. Say, for example, if you're doing garments, so you're selling, you know, shirts and things like that are different sizes, different colors, you'll quite often put that information in the title, but not necessarily within the feed itself. There are attributes for that within, you know, the product set for clothing is quite comprehensive. They won't stop products being shown in Google Ads, so they won't get disapproved if you leave them out. But they will obviously perform better, and you can extract that data using the new rules. So if you, for example, have got red check shirt size XL, red check shirt size L, etc., you can pull the color, for example. You can extract that data from the title. So you can then populate the color feed by saying, look at the title, and if you have to provide a list basically of colors,
and then populate the color variable.
And so it populates another part of the data that then ticks off a thing on your data saying, oh, actually I've gone from 4,000 products where that field wasn't being used. So it increases the performance of that product. Same with product size. Clothing is a good example, actually, because there's lots of variables, you know, with clothing. So you've got size, you've got color, you know, and
male, female.
And it's one that people tend not to. So they tend to put that stuff in description. They don't tend to put it into fields even though most CMS platforms,
you end up with literally 50 variables for one SKU.
yeah.
Color
If you, some of our products have got 8, 9, 10,000 product SKUs.
Yeah.
If I go to that customer and say, "Oh, by the way, you've got to go and add color into 10," they're going to go,
"It's a bad day." Yeah.
How important is it, Andy? Is it,
Yeah.
are my products going to get disapproved if I don't put that?
Yeah.
At the minute, no, they're not. But
Yeah.
they're not going to perform as well. But
So it's like we're basically, what we're doing here then is we're taking this feed, and rather than, the reality is, most people may have spent some time doing some of their SEO on their site, but they know quite often that maybe they've done some work on the categorization, subcategorization, and pulled that through. But they're probably always quite often behind the curve with their SEO naming convention. Things are changing. They might have got so far, worked with an agency for so long, but then new sets of products come in. But what this means we can do is we can SEO the feed rather than SEOing the website and having to do having to go, oh God, we've got to change everything on the website. Yeah, you're joking. Well, we haven't. What you do, you work in the merchant feed and agree as a team and say, right, well, actually, we've got these products, but we don't mention the fact, we're just saying it's a size 12, black, Pegasus 37. Well, that's a Nike, but we don't mention Nike because it's a Nike store. You don't necessarily mention the brand on the description. Not always, no. But that's a big mistake for sort of for merchant, because when you isolate it away from your website and push it into merchant feed, put it into an advert, put it onto the Google first page as an ad, you're not on the website, are you anymore? You're on Google's, or you're on Google. So you need that naming convention, sort of SEO namings, the research.
You've got to outperform. It's just the same as SEO. You're up against other competition within the shopping channel. So you've got to be smart. You've got to outperform those people. And the one way of doing that is by optimizing the feed, not using even descriptions. Yeah. We had a client where their description requirement for the website was that they had to put key ingredients of a product. Yeah. But those key ingredients would get the products disapproved in Merchant Center. Yeah. Yeah. So we wrote rules to change some of the descriptions. Remove. Yeah. Yeah. And now it's a bit more complicated now because they've changed the guidance on that again. So if it's on page, they'll still get disapproved now. But we've done things like, there's nothing really that you can't edit or change within Merchant Center. So what I'm saying basically is you can do this work without having to go back to the client or say to the client, I need this changing, and they've got to go to their dev, and their dev comes back and say, yeah, we'll do that for you. It's another 500 quid. Yeah. Or £1,000 or whatever. So you can do those processes. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the time, anyway. Some of them are quite complicated to write unless you're using a third-party tool. But
so it's developed a lot, the Merchant Center, as its own right. And then obviously there are third-party tools that sort of layer on, and we're getting one of our third-party tool partners. I'm chatting to them at the moment. They may be on the podcast soon. I'm just sorting out a few things with them. We've got a few things in the pipeline with them, so we'll keep that under wraps for now. But obviously feeds it's like it's like, well, you've got a website, and that website for me, it's got to be on a solid platform. You've got a Shopify, Magento, and it's a solid type, a solid foundation. And your Google shopping ads is similar in that you need to get the foundation right with your Merchant Center and your feed. It's no good. The amount of times that we see people saying, oh, we tried Google shopping, it doesn't work, and you can sort of say that, insert any sort of marketing, SEO, Facebook ads, whatever it may be, into that conversation. I tried Facebook ads, it didn't work. Tried Google shopping, it didn't work. Tried shopping ads, it didn't work. And usually, the key sort of ingredient why it didn't work is because they took a feed, pushed it in, and went live with some basic ads. And that's the mistake. And what Andy's saying there is, you can take that feed, you can then manipulate that data, add in extra variables. We can pull the data 4 times a day, so your feed's fresh, up to date, whereas some of your competitors might be doing it once a day, or once a week, or once a month, and advertising on stuff that's out of stock, and paying for clicks that when they get there it says out of stock, and then you're like, oh, why am I seeing an ad if it's out of stock? You're saving money there. you've got a high score, this sort of elusive high score that you're trying to get in the account. So it's really, this feed piece is a fundamental piece within the sort of the whole Google Shopping sort of ecosphere, where, you need to get this right. So I think another one that I get asked, Andy, quite a lot is, our shipping rates and our shipping table, it's very complicated. Google Shopping just can't handle that. We ship all around the world. We ship to Jersey. We ship to this, that, and the other. We've got different couriers. How does the merchant center deal with that? How can you set up quite complicated shipping tables? Is that something merchant center can do well?
Yeah, that's another good question, actually. Yeah, merchant center itself, so you can pass shipping information either within the feed.
Yeah.
So you can pass that directly from your CMS, your back office.
Yeah.
Or it's got its own shipping matrix, so you can build a shipping matrix. They can be quite complicated if they need to be.
Yeah.
A lot of people get put off by the fact that it can be. If your shipping's not majorly complicated, then they're relatively easy to set up. So they use a table system, or there's different ways you can do it, actually. So, but people that have got complicated shipping systems, I think we see that a bit where some of the items can be quite heavy, and you've got different zones to ship to and all this sort of thing.
You can put all that in the merchant center then.
You can put all that in the merchant center. And of course, another way of looking at it is to look at I think is, one of our colleague Henry's, one of his favorite sayings is the 80-20 rule. And actually look at your products and say, right, well, actually, these products are easily shippable. They've got a fairly standard flat rate. So the smaller products that you ship, I would say, will all come under your sort of normal Royal Mail shipping standards and all that sort of thing. So if you can ship those easily, then create your feed with those products. So look at your products as a whole and say, right, out of those products, what 20% of my products that have got a good value and I can ship on a good standard rate, let's take those and put those in the feed. Initially, get a feed up and running, see if it's going to work for you. If it's going to work for you, then you start scratching your head and saying, right, these more complicated, you can set up separate shipping tables as well, by the way. So it's not just one.
You layer them.
You can layer them in. So you can say, right, this is my normal Royal Mail shipping. So I've got all these products I can ship by Royal Mail. That's straightforward. It's either this much, or this much.
I think,
And then you can look at couriers and say, right, if I want to ship courier, I've got to do it by weight. So sometimes that means adding extra fields into your feed. So there are the fields for shipping weight, and you can do shipping labels as well. So you can say, if it's got this label within the feed, this is the shipping rate that it goes at. So it's a really comprehensive system.
So I think the big takeaway there is those that are listening in that are maybe holding off setting up shopping, sort out that, the 80-20, as we all know, you're going to have those core lines or those core weights, as it may be, or locations that are the bulk of your orders. So sort out that shipping matrix, get those products in, get those shipping, then layer in. But while you're layering in, you're making money on the bulk. Don't let that be a hold up. And obviously, if you get stuck, ping Andy at eComOne.com. He'll more than jump on a call and give you a hand with that as well. Might regret saying that, but
I would say don't let anything. There's no blockers. To you having a crack at Google Shopping. Especially now, now Google, with the COVID-19 incident, they've given you an option to actually show your products for free within certain places. So there's no reason really for anybody that can produce a feed from their system not to have a crack at it. And if it proves to you that way, you'll never get rid of the paid option, because the paid option, there is so much you can do to optimize that and outperform everybody else. So but it gives you an opportunity to do it and see if it's viable.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we're referring to there is Google announced about 10 weeks ago that they were bringing back sort of free Google Shopping, but obviously in inverted commas, because
everybody thought it was great, didn't they, mate? Hey, we're going back to frugal days.
That was the headline. That was the clickbait sort of thing. Free Google Shopping. Oh, but obviously then all the sort of have a go heroes jumped in. It's not free. Well, of course there is a free option, but it's not. The sort of headline is not you go to Google and get free Google Shopping ads. The headline is you go to the Google Shopping tab and you can list your products in there somewhere for free. So we sort of had the analogy of, well, you're not getting a shop. Google aren't giving you a shop on the high street. They're giving you a shop on one of the back streets, but they're still giving you a shop. They're still giving you some passing trade, but you're not getting 10,000 cars driving past every hour. You get a few people walking past and a few a one way street maybe. So that's been rolled out in the US completely. My understanding. Is it in the UK yet?
I've not seen it yet. I mean, in Merchant Centre, it shows up as surfaces, known as surfaces.
Yeah.
So we are seeing that in all of our feeds now.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of clients that obviously they do ship internationally as well. So they are getting what you actually see in Merchant Centre is paid clicks and what's known as non-paid.
Yeah.
So you've got your normal Google Shopping where you're paying for.
Yeah.
And then you've got this other feed that is non-paid. So it's almost like organic clicks, but within the shopping.
So that's one to watch, guys. That's one we've got to keep an eye on. I think it's coming. So we keep an eye on the channels, keep an eye on the podcast, keep an eye on the blog. We've got a blog on eComOne regarding this free Google Shopping element, which Henry, the head of ads, has put on, and we're going to update that as sort of the UK has some more announcements. So that's sort of quite a recent, last couple of months. But what else, Andy, would you say? We've got people listening to the podcast that are more experienced, these guys that might be spending, tens of thousands a month, very experienced in terms of their account structure, their setup. What are some of the real recent updates within the Merchant Centre that they might not be aware of? I know we've touched on quite a lot, to be fair, so I know I'm testing you a bit here, but a couple more things that are a bit more recent that are maybe less talked about or brand new. I know we talked about High Score, which not many people know about. We've talked about the free Google Shopping, and things like that. But what else is there in the Merchant Centre side that maybe...
Yeah, so one thing a lot of people aren't aware of is... we all know Google changes the algorithm. People are forever chasing it. I say that don't chase the algorithm. Beat your competitors. They're the people you should be trying to sort out. But Google also update the specification for product feeds.
Yeah.
So obviously it will affect different things depending on what you're doing. They have recently announced, so there was a couple that came into play almost straight away. So I think it was June time when they made the announcements for this year's changes. So a couple of them, for example, I won't go through them all because there was quite a few of them, but a couple that were quite interesting to us through some of the clients we deal with is one known as installment and subscription cost attributes. So these have been added into the product feed spec if you're dealing with sort of wireless products and the services category. So a good example of that would be if you're selling mobile phones and you have an option to purchase the phone outright or via installment.
That's a good one, because I think more and more e-com stores are adding subscription. We've got clients that sell coffee, for example, and they are adding right now. They don't have subscription, but by the time this podcast airs in about a week's time, they will have subscription. So we'll be able to put their subscription offer through their Google Shopping account.
So it'd be an interesting one to watch that, because at the minute it looks as if they're only going to put it on certain product categories. But I think if it's successful there, they'll roll it out elsewhere. So effectively it will allow you to show both prices. So the full price, buy it this price, or you can buy it
very useful.
this.
Very useful.
Another one is changes to the product detail attribute. So this is a new. So this will allow you to provide technical specs that aren't covered by the normal attributes.
Okay.
So it has 3 required sub attributes to do it. So section name, attribute name, and attribute value. And again, using your mobile phone again, an example of this would be to include product detail on the capacity of the mobile phone's battery.
Yeah.
So your section name could be battery, attribute name capacity, and the value is, it's 4,000.
Wow.
Whatever it is, the actual.
Over there. Whatever. Battery life.
So again, it's another way of providing. It's not. I don't think they're going to put it as a required. If you use the attribute, then there are those requirements.
So
you must be able to show those 3 variables. But again, there's quite a few products out there where I could see that being a really useful addition. Another one is category specific requirement. So media and clothing that require additional attributes. So again, we touched on that earlier with things like gender, age group, size, colour.
It's an important one, isn't it? Clothing. Clothing is obviously a huge part of our business.
Well, they're making those now. Currently, like I mentioned earlier, they are optional.
Yeah.
So if you're selling clothing, it is optional to add gender, age group, size, colour. We would say
like a lot of these things, though, isn't it? A lot of these things are optional. But if you're out there, you said, I think taking it back for like 3 minutes, we're not trying to trace the algorithm. We're trying to beat the competitors, and that's the reality. So all those other competitors that are doing shopping, and if you're in a niche, 99% of niches are very competitive. There's a few exceptions, but mainly, most things you buy, you need that competitive edge. Now, whether that's negotiating an extra 5% of the cost, better terms, better warehousing, better deals with the courier, all those things. Okay, great. But if everyone then is taking a feed, putting it into the merchant center, pushing it through, you can get a massive competitive edge on your ad spend if you've got the best feed. If you've got 100 out of 100 score, on your feed. And some of these things you're saying there, if you sell clothing, you need to be breaking the variables down. You need to be creating these custom variables. You need to be breaking everything down to every single variable that is in your account needs to be populated. And if it's not, it needs to be a damn good discussion, reason why not, because that gives you the competitive edge. Because what that does, it means that when you're showing your ads are triggering correctly for the correct search terms more than your competitors are, because they've just gone and put, I sell men's size 12 shoes. Well, what about, is there a width? Is there a brand? Is there a color? Of course, you might have some of this stuff, but will you have it all? And these new variables give you another layer of sort of exclusivity for a while, because quite often most people are busy, lazy, whichever one you want to go with, busy usually, or they're leaving, another agency or their expert to do it. So, some great tips there. So what we're going to do is move on.
Just one thing on that last one really is a good heads up from Google, because they have actually stated now within if you don't use those attributes, your products will still remain eligible to serve, but the performance may be limited. So it's Google saying, if you want to beat your competitors, do it.
And I think it is the one. It is the one where we just see. Obviously, we've been using shopping. It doesn't work. We've been using shopping, but we're not happy. And straight away, it's garbage in, garbage out. Is sort of the analogy. You've got a basic. It's like you've got basic nutrition going in. Your overall long-term health is going to be substandard. So right, we're going to finish off with a couple of SEO bits, because now not only does Andy sort of head up our technical, the umbrella is sort of technical lead of all our technical services and the technical team. So that's sort of the ad side, but also the SEO side. Now, we wanted this to be focused primarily on feed, but I thought it'd be good just to get your opinion on some of the sort of technical aspects of SEO. So I think when we say technical SEO, it gets a bit, people get a bit like, flipping heck, here we go,
panic.
We're going to talk about metadata and site speed again for the next 9 years, or, there's a bit more to it, obviously. you know, than sort of a couple of things. But, you know, where would you say, where's the best place to start? You know, for these guys, they're on the podcast, they, you know, they're maybe starting out, you know, or they're doing their £1,000,000 a month, you know, and everything in between. What would be a good go-to start point for somebody to go and have a look, you know, at their technical elements of their SEO that could maybe just, you know, really, you know, find that one or two things that you quite often see that really might be able to move the needle if they're not right? What would be a couple of tips you can give us there?
I mean, a lot of the time people get confused by if you're looking at SEO, really, there's sort of a couple of elements. So you've got your on page, and then you've got everything else that you do that sort of drives stuff to the page.
Yeah.
Technical SEO really is the behind the scenes elements that power the growth of your website, such as site architecture, mobile optimization, page speed. And they're not, you know, they're not the sexiest things to sort of investigate, and quite often they're difficult to investigate.
Yeah.
But there's tools there. I mean, if you're going to start doing any work on your site, then I would say the first port of call really is to do an audit of the site. So you can't start to make changes unless you understand the way the site is built already. So you look at your site maps, for example. We quite often see sites that don't even have an XML sitemap, yet it's a key factor for pushing into Search Console, or you know, Google's crawlers will come along, and one of the first things they will look at is the robots.txt file. And if your sitemap's in the robots.txt file, then they'll go, oh, actually, they're providing us a map for the site. Let's have a look there. And that is where they'll go next. You know, and it's a key technical area that a lot of people ignore. A lot of people also let those get too big. A good thing with sitemaps, and this is a relatively new thing with sitemaps as well, is there's always been limits to the size of a sitemap. And people have always sort of touted that as 50,000 URLs. People now are breaking that down to more finite, manageable chunks. So we're seeing sitemaps now that are limiting to 10,000 URLs.
Multiple sitemaps.
Yeah. So we're looking at, you know, on big sites, breaking the navigation at a top level. So your top level categories as a sitemap for. So if you've got a site that is shirts, trousers, boots, you know, a sitemap for each of those components, because what we're seeing is it's giving the robots. Most people think robots are crawling their site all the time. They're actually not. They come very rarely, and when they do come, they've got a finite amount of time, and then they're off again. So if we can break your site down into more sort of bite-sized chunks,
so that goes with the navigation as well, you know.
You know, site speed is another big thing, and it's going to be more so next year. Things are changing again, you know, the algorithm's changing again, and stuff like that.
So you say, okay, so technical SEO, you know, we talked about crawlability there, architecture, you know, speed. We always talk about speed. Let's not talk about speed again. But
unfortunately, that's one of the key elements.
I know. Everyone tells me off for saying that because it's still important. It's so important, you know. And if you go in the web, you go in Search Console now, it's all in there as well. And you know, clearly, you know, they've been giving us a clue for about 5 years, haven't they? But it's still the new thing, speed. But it will always be. You know, and the reality is, you know, Google wants to deliver the right result. If you've got a good experience, which is fast, you find what you want quick. You know, speed, bounce rate. You know, it's going to be good. So you say about doing an audit. So some of those things you're going to find in an audit. But for those guys that go, all right, well, where do I start? What's the start point with a bit of software? What sort of software? What's the software go to start to do some audit pieces? Where would you go software-wise to do an audit?
Me personally, the tool I use is a tool called Screaming Frog.
Yeah.
You can get a free version of Screaming Frog. It will limit you to a certain number of URLs, or there's a paid option. It's not a massive cost. It's not like the SEM rushes and Ahrefs where it's going to cost you several £100 a month, or I think it's about £100 and something a year. Screaming Frog. But if you really want to do it at the base level, then I would say Search Console.
Yeah.
Both, actually, not just Google Search Console. People ignore Bing, and they ignore Bing at their peril. It is still not got anywhere near the market share that Google has, and probably never will have.
Yeah.
But they have developed a pretty impressive set of tools for looking at your site, and they've just done a major overhaul of their interface and put a built-in audit system, which that's something Search Console doesn't have. You need to understand Search Console to work with it.
They're two free. There's free up. Obviously, Search Console's free. Well, always be free. Should always be free. Okay, so we've got Search Console, we've got Screaming Frog. Dive in there, get stuck in. And I think it's one of those things, or two things there, that you need to get used to going into. You need to get used to using and getting some routines in there. I think we've written various blogs over the years on our SEO Traffic Lab.
I think one of the teams actually working on a new. So watch out for that one. They are currently writing one on the new features of Search Console and Bing Webmaster. So Bing's known as Bing Webmaster Tools. And it is very similar to Search. In fact, I actually think it's more powerful than Search Console.
Not utilized, like you say.
It's very underutilized.
As they always do. We've had that. I remember doing it was my colleague actually, Henry, did a talk on ads, and the guy asked a question in the crowd, and sort of a locally well-known businessman around here. So, what do you think of Bing? He said, and he was sort of saying it jokingly as if we would say, "Oh, waste of time." And obviously, what we said was, "Well, it's fantastic, for cheap leads, especially on paid ads, it's easier."
Yeah, paid, definitely.
And he's like, "Really? What's a waste of time? You don't get anything." But let everyone think that while us and our clients are busy picking up the cheaper cost of conversions, the easier rankings, because the reality is, there isn't thousands of people trying to dominate that space. There's a few. So, Bing, like you say, Bing Webmaster Tools equivalent, great one as well. Right.
I can't remember what their share of search data is at the minute. It's still very low, but if you think about the fact that there are
4%.
Billions of searches a day,
if you can get 4% of your leads at half price, why will you not be? It's just simple maths, really.
And there are people that will only use Bing to search. They won't use Google.
I think on paid ads, we've got clients that are, say, doing 100 grand on a month on shopping, and they spend about 10 grand a month on Bing. So it's about 10% on the paid ads we find is normal.
Yeah.
And I think on the SEO side, organic, I think it's a bit less, personally. But
it's definitely a powerful tool. So
thanks, Andy. We're going to draw this to an end. It's been a fantastic. God, time just flies by. I think we're scraping on the hour. So many great takeaways there. I think the big one for me, is just don't be scared of this sort of technical element. It's so important to get in there, get in your merchant center, understand the basics, make sure you get a clean set of data, and then start. That's your 80-20. And then start layering in these more advanced features, these more advanced sort of things around different pricing grids for your, for your delivery, adding in product data to variables, making sure all the variables you're filling them in, custom variables, custom labels, and then optimizing everywhere that you can, and obviously looking at some of these SEO type tips as well. So I always like to end every episode, Andy, on a book recommendation. Now, I know for a fact that you are a huge, huge reader, so we could be here for some time. So I want you to give me one book recommendation, not 5.
Right. So I'll go for the one that's permanently on my desk then, shall I?
Do that.
This book never leaves my desk. It is a quite technical one, but it's an important one as well, because it's another thing that we haven't really discussed today, but another area I look after. And you can see that. So it's Google Analytics breakthrough.
Yeah. From zero to business impact. Ferris Alola,
yeah, I don't know how to pronounce their names. But
Eric Fettman.
Eric Fettman's well known in the industry for stuff to do with. And the reason I like this book is it's a fairly hefty book, as you can see. And it would probably scare most people if they picked it up off a shelf and looked and gone, God, that's a bit technical. It covers a lot of the technical aspects of Google Analytics, how to set it up, how to get the best out of it, how to understand the data that you're getting. But it's one of those books where you can go, oh, how do I do so-and-so? Jump straight in. Yeah. Read that bit, go and do it. Yeah. You don't have to read the whole book. You don't have to become an expert. I'm not an expert. I'm not a believer in experts on things, to be fair, because you're always learning. Yeah. You have got knowledgeable people.
Yeah. Anybody that calls himself an expert, that's not a great start.
But yeah, brilliant book.
An expert. Yeah.
Absolutely cracking book. You can read it all if you're that way inclined. But
yeah, I mean, I'm quite familiar with it, and I would definitely sort of endorse it. I know it breaks down sort of specific sort of scenarios within a business. If you've got this, Fred had a business that did X, Y, Z, and he was concerned about how to track this. So he talks about a B2B and e-com and different case study specifics where you can use e-com analytics and data. And that's very much what we as an agency stand for. Our agency tagline, for our SEO agency is performance-driven digital marketing. And that can only be done if you know where you are with the numbers. So that book, I know, is Andy's Bible has been for. You've had that about 5 years, I think, haven't you? That one.
Yeah. It's I think analytics is a whole. Yeah, it's a whole new podcast, I think.
Well, I think you've just sorted that out then. So see Andy back on the podcast in a few weeks' time, or couple of months' time. I think maybe one for later in the year when we'll look at the analytics side of SEO and PPC as well, because I know that's one where a lot of people get things wrapped around the neck, and there's nothing worse than not knowing your numbers in my mind, as a business owner. So, right, well, thank you, Andy. Now, for the guys that are listening in that would like to maybe reach out to you, connect with you, what's the best place and best way of connecting with you, Andy?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I can't remember what my tab is. If you search for Andy Birkitt, and you'll find me under eComOne and SEO Traffic Lab, or via email. So Andy at SEOTrafficLab.com or Andy at eComOne.com, and I'm always checking those.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so it should be easy enough to find me.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you for listening to this episode. Obviously, a fantastic episode. Lots of real nuggets there from Andy on the technical side of the Merchant Center and some of the SEO bits. Obviously, looking forward to getting Andy back on the podcast in a couple of months. I have a feeling Andy's going to become a regular